Welcome back to the IX event. Once again, here's Mehul Shah.
Everyone. All right, that's loud enough. I hope everyone is having as much fun as I'm having. I think one of the most interesting comment I heard was the CIO roundtable. We had Pfizer and Pratt & Whitney along with Vivek from LNS. And you know how long it takes to get approvals from legal, especially when you're from defense. They had 30 slides, and the entire 2 hours, they were on the second slide. That tells you how good the engagement was. I'm really excited that we are in the final session of day 1. The topic here is how do we move transformation from vision to value. Now, I think we've talked about this a few times about how do you accelerate the pace of transformation. You talk to any transformation leader, there are 3 challenges you will consistently hear. We have a lot of pilots, but we have challenges moving out of pilots. Number 2, we got funding from the leadership. We got our transformation approved by the board. How do I move a push initiative to a pull initiative? I'm sure we all have heard about it. The third thing, how do I move from continuous improvement? As manufacturing, we have done continuous improvement for a long time. How do I move that from continuous to step change improvement? You've heard from some of the speakers today. Now is your opportunity to ask questions. We have some amazing speakers from across different industries, and they'll talk about what they're doing to move transformation from vision to value. And this is an open Q&A. So this is where you bring your best questions. Make sure you got the difficult questions, and we can get to the meat of it. I want to invite our first 2 panelists, Jim Wells, research analyst from LNS Research, and Russ Fadel, CEO, Augmenteer. Please welcome them.
Welcome to the closing panel for day 1. My name is James Wells. I'm a research analyst with LNS Research, covering Quality 4.0 and performance excellence. And I'm joined on stage today by Russ Fadel of Augmenteer. So Russ, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and what Augmenteer is up to?
That sounds great, James. Thanks. Yes, I'm Russ Fadel, and I'm the CEO and one of the 3 founders of Augmenteer. What I'd like to cover today, we're talking about kind of vision to value, and I'd like to kind of draw a parallel to how new technology gets into the market from a supplier standpoint like Augmenteer, and then kind of give you some background on my company, and then also talk about how a couple of our customers have gone from vision to value. Many of you might recognize this. This is Jeffrey Moore's famous crossing the chasm slide. And pretty much, it's very much like going from POC to an enterprise deployment, where in the first stage you have early adopters and innovators who are searching for technology that can deliver value, and they pilot it and they prove it and they try it. And really, the goal for suppliers like myself is to cross the chasm into Main Street adoption. And it's the exact same pilot to enterprise. You have to generate enough value for at least one or more stakeholders where they want you to succeed and they pull you across. So the things that help you do it or don't do it really is either you're leveraging a change in technology or you're solving kind of the most important problem of the day. And that's going to be, I'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the connected worker space, how I see that the problem has changed in the last 5 years or so. So a little bit about the founding team at Augmenteer. There are 3 founders, and we've been pretty successful in founding manufacturing software companies. Phil Huber, my chief of product, founded Wonder in '87, and they crossed the chasm because they made the decision to write their solution on Windows when everyone else was using DOS. And Windows, the platform itself, gave them great leverage. They went public and they kind of created the packaged software space in factories. I founded Lightheimer in '97 in the manufacturing intelligence space, and what got us across the chasm is we made the decision to deliver data using embedded web servers in factories. This was before 2000. Everyone else is making you install like thick client or fat clients on every desktop in the company. And so our use of this, sort of at the time novel technology to use browsers as the delivery mechanism had us go through the chasm and got acquired by SAP. And then we found that ThingWorx in 2009, and we really leveraged a difference in problem solving. And so when you think about the connected worker space, the problem that the original connected worker solutions were trying to solve was the idea that in 5 years, 35% of your workers were going to retire. So you're thinking, well, how do I close the skills gap? Grandson is coming in to replace granddad or grandmother. And so that was, you would design for that problem. But today the problem's completely different. It's 35% of your workers might be gone in 5 months, right? And so the original model was a push model. Let's push richer content to these cohort of workers, which are all the same. Today, you have to learn a lot about each worker so you can figure out how to guide and support them individually. So that's the big thing in how we see at Augmenteer the connected worker space. I think what's next, I probably will have a couple customers to talk about. We'll see. Okay, so two of our customers had successfully gone from vision to value. Colgate, about 2 years ago, went into their first exploration of the connected worker space. They really were focused originally on preventive maintenance. They used SAP PM. They felt like they could create efficiencies at the point of work in preventive maintenance. They decided on our platform. They deployed it to 10 facilities. And the second thing they wanted is a decentralized approach to supporting this technology. So they had this idea of citizen authors. So anyone at any facility could author workflows. And so in the first 6 months, they authored 8,000. Right now, they're on the path to be 100% digital in their factory, so no paper anywhere. They're deployed in safety, quality, autonomous maintenance, and preventive maintenance. So real successful. They're in 20 facilities. They'll be in the bulk of their facilities by this time next year. So real successful and real good partner for us. They've been very helpful in helping us prioritize our roadmap. The second company is kind of on the other end of the spectrum. It'll come up in a moment. So they, we can't use their name, but they're in the seed and crop protection space. And they actually had deployed an earlier connected worker technology in about 40 facilities. They started to try to do some more advanced applications, and they kind of ran out of sort of capability in the product. And so they went and reevaluated the market and came up and selected us. So they selected us in June. In the next 90 days, we converted 1,000 work procedures into native Augmenteer format. And then in September, they went from none of it running to fully operational in 40 sites globally. Centralized team, so all of the process authoring, the workflow authoring is done centrally, as opposed to Colgate, which is done essentially locally off standard templates. And they today, this company does autonomous maintenance, quality, safety. They're going to look at deploying it as a front end to their SAP PM instance next year also. So it's really two different ways to get to the end result of getting value out of your vision. I remember I knew the original founder of Wonderware, the CEO, who was with Phil Huber, and he used to tell me this great thing is the difference between vision and hallucination is execution. So when you think about going from pilot to enterprise rollout, a big chunk of it really truly is execution.
Can I steal that?
Yeah.
I like that. I'm gonna
I stole it. Why not?
Yeah.
There's
So
no honor among thieves.
Right, sure. So those are some great stories, Russ. Thank you for sharing those. I'm curious, what are some trends that you're seeing currently in your customer engagements?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because we got into the market and so we experienced pre-pandemic, the initial pandemic, and then now what I would say is the endemic phase of the pandemic, where the initial, before the pandemic, people were really thinking about this retiring workforce and skills gap. When the pandemic hit, everyone was like, let's do remote assistance. I can't do a factory acceptance test or a site acceptance test. I have to do that remotely. And then now today, they're really, the two biggest pains for manufacturers, as all of you who are manufacturers know, it's supply chain and it's workforce. And they're really focused on two things, really attaching skills to work, because you have this problem of You have high churn now, so the number of people you have to onboard and get into the productive side of the workforce safely and correctly has gone up, dramatically. Very much focused on that and focused on, I'm really, there's a lot of replacement of the first wave of connected worker solutions. So we have, maybe a third of the opportunities we're involved are people who've gone a certain way down that path and are now looking for a way to go farther.
Nice. And what do you see developing in the near future in connected worker?
Yeah, so I think more in the theme of connecting skills and endorsements and qualifications and using actual work to provide a real feedback loop, so you know who should be reskilled or who should be upskilled. So tightening that loop where you have good data to look at it. The second thing is, if you think about one of the issues in manufacturing employment is really a lack of engagement. A lot of workers don't feel like their work is valued. So I think that we need to raise the frontline workforce to make them first-class citizens in the enterprise. To get them on the internal collaboration network so their input and their knowledge can become part of the company's asset. And then finally, I think I was saying this to James. So when I go to a website today, the ad tech company behind that website uses 50 to 500 different items they know about me to serve an ad up for a $7 toy, right? So when you think about our frontline workers, we consider nothing. We think of them as a single cohort, or we might use their title. And so I think the era of mass personalization of guidance and support in manufacturing, I think we're at the cusp of that.
Nice. All right. Well, that's great. Thanks for those perspectives. At this point, I'd like to bring up the rest of the panel. My colleague Allison Kuhn, Lance Fountaine from Cargill, and Anthony Huffin from Molex. Thanks for joining us on stage. Allison, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Perfect. Allison Kuhn. So I joined LNS in April. I'm a newbie like Jim, but I come after 20 plus years in process industry, global maintenance, knowledge management. My focus areas here are sustainability, ESG. I also do future of industrial work, the connected frontline worker, and I also still get to dabble in APM.
Okay, I'll go next, so I'll wait for my slide to come up. Lance Fountain, and I'm with Cargill, and I'm the corporate smart manufacturing leader for Cargill. So I've been at this digital journey since about the early 1990s. So I spent 20 years with Alcoa. I started in the automation world and automation and control, HMI world. Ended up doing a stint in IT, got kind of talked into that. And then had the opportunity and the pleasure of driving IT/OT convergence across Cargill. And all that background finally got me to a position where I was leading global manufacturing solutions for Alcoa. Sorry, I said that wrong. For Alcoa. And we realized we had a data and digital problem, and it was much bigger than our MES systems on the shop floor. So we decided at that time to kickstart Alcoa's smart manufacturing program. And that was a pretty big success around 2010. I then did some consulting as a principal advisor for digital transformation for a company called OSI Soft. I expect many of you know that company. And one of the clients I worked closely with was Cargill, so I wound up at Cargill in 2018, and now I lead Cargill's smart manufacturing journey, really setting the vision and strategy for the company, but also supporting our 4 enterprises and 10 plus business groups on this journey. And I think of our role as corporate as, really being, serving them, they're our customer, and helping them be successful. So it's a large, complex company, 155,000 plus employees across 70 countries with over 900 operating locations. So it's a daunting task, but we know we have to get on this value journey quickly. All the headwinds we talk about, all the pressures we talk about, they're real. And in order for us to be successful and continue our journey as a 155-year-old company, we've got to change how we operate. So I'm sharing a slide with you today. I'm not going to cover it, but it talks a little bit about how we see the pivots from vision to value, and basically calls out, everyone starts in discover and learn. And at some point in time, after you spent that time in discover and learn, you realize you really need to step back and stop doing hundreds and thousands of projects and think about how you take a very strategic approach. And that strategic approach is about targeting value, the biggest value opportunities, and scaling that value very rapidly. But while you're doing that, you're really doing something else that's even more important. And that is laying a foundation that you can build your journey upon. And I can't emphasize enough how important that is. And it's really the big part of the pivot from discover and learn. And lo and behold, when you're in this phase of maturity for a while, you realize there's a bigger picture at play. And when you hit critical mass, now you can start talking about new ways of working and transformation. And that's the transformation we really want to achieve. That's what we want to achieve at Cargill. That's the big value lever we pull. But you can't do it without building the building blocks first. So this is a little bit about Cargill's journey from vision to value, and certainly we'll talk more about that as we get into the Q&A portion.
Great. Thanks, Lance. And last but not least, Anthony Huffman from Molex. Please tell us about yourself and what's going on at Molex.
Yeah, thanks. So Tony Huffman, I have been in operations for about 18 years. Past 7 years been at Molex. So if you haven't heard of Molex, it's an electronics solutions company. We got about 45,000 employees, about 80 manufacturing plants. I'm not going to read the boring part on top. I'll jump down to our framework. So this was built over time, but it's not unlike a lot of the frameworks that you've been presented probably this week or have talked with vendors about. When we look at our transformation, we've got pretty large initiatives across intelligent digital supply chain, manufacturing ops, product development, and connected product and customer experience. It's a big journey for us. It's going to take some time. And so we had to build a framework that allowed us to cross the chasm and keep the momentum going. And so this is just a snippet of it. There's more details behind the scenes, but it's made up of these 5 stages. So the first one is innovate and experiment. So we have a culture of rapid experimentation. It's okay to fail as long as you're learning. And the outcome of that is, how do you get to a proof of value that's scalable, something that you can actually bring across our enterprise? The second stage is how to solution that. So how do you develop the playbooks, the mechanisms, and again, these are capabilities, so you need to think from a people, process, and technology lens. And what you're trying to do there is come up with a 80-20 template or something that you can easily adopt and roll out across our enterprise. Once you hit that point, you're now at what we call an inflection point of, we need to stand up value delivery teams to go out and implement regionally. And those folks are building their capability muscle. They're applying this new capability. They're able to adopt it in our sites. It's got the word localization here. We actually take an adoption first approach, localization if necessary. And then we need to stabilize and improve so that that capability will mature over time. There's a team of people that would support it to make sure that we've got a scalable solution that's supported not only in our enterprise, but how can we potentially read across other Coke companies and leverage our leveraged capabilities throughout Coke? And then how do we improve upon that? How do we make enhancements? How do you evolve that capability set over time? And then finally, it's realizing the value. So this is 5 different points of value: employee experience, capability maturity. So we do an assessment and try to get to that desired state. And then there's the KPIs and metrics that we've established globally. And then there's the financials. And the last piece is this providing growth opportunities? Is it introducing new products and services that we can potentially bring to market?
Thanks for that, Anthony. Appreciate it. So my first question for the group is sort of related to what one of the things that Russ talked about is the great amount of employee turnover in the workforce nowadays. So how are digital natives present in the workforce affecting program deployments and the pivot from vision to value in your experience? So Anthony, you want to take that first?
Yeah, so we talked about this in some of the roundtables, but we term it as digital DNA, and it's a maturity and a proficiency that people gain over time. And so what we do is we bring in new people to help invigorate our knowledge networks, new energy and new information coming into those knowledge networks. It could be at a lower level within a factory. It could also be at the C-suite, bringing in new leaders, a chief digital officer, somebody that's going to bring in a new mindset that will help shift how we think about data, how we think about our approach to transformation. And so we try to take a top-down, bottom-up, and then those teams working together. So the digital natives, along with the domain experts, they come up with new ways and they work as a collaborative team. And what happens over time is that frozen middle, we call it, starts to thaw.
Great. What about you, Lance? What do you see?
I just think, I kind of agree with what Tony said, but the truth is changing expectations. I mean, we try to attract the best talent, as I'm sure everybody here in the room does and everybody watching online. But the truth is they don't want to come and write things down on paper. They don't want to run sneakerware, right, where they're running data and spreadsheets all around the plant. They expect things to be digital. They do everything on their cell phone, their mobile device. They're constantly connected. And unfortunately, in so many of our plants today, when they get into that environment, that's not a world that exists. And I think it's going to be really hard to retain that workforce if we aren't able to connect to them and deliver information and capabilities the way they use that technology at home. So I think it's obviously we have to manage that because we've got still some of the workforce that is older and may not have that acumen. But I do think that's driving the change, and we need to go there. We don't have an option. This is what they expect. These are the people that will run our plants in the future.
Right. Yep. Great. Allison, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so we've been through a few of the first phases of Connected Worker, and we see the value that it brings. And one of the biggest things that with the new Gen Z and millennials bring in is they will refuse not to be in the know, not to be in the loop. They're used to having access to the data when they want it. They want control, though, of their own data and information, so that is important. But actively engaging and making sure, first get them in the door, keep them in the door for preferably longer than a year or so. But also recognizing it's 50% of Gen Z actually have a side hustle. So how do you make sure that when they're there, right? Having the metrics and the visibility as to what they're doing. And this is the age of the TikTok era, if you would, right? Don't give me a binder, Lance. I'm not going to come in and read it, and I'm not saying I'm a Gen Zer, but they're looking for the information and the data that is in the way that they want to learn it, fast, on time, and they want to feel engaged, empowered, and be part of a solution.
Russ, I'm curious your perspective on that from the provider side. Have you seen any changes in demands from client engagements about adoption of Connected Worker?
We've seen some indication, but my experience is way more personal. I have two daughters who are like 21 and 22, and you call them and you get a text right back. I mean, so we do see. And I'm part of a manufacturing business in Pennsylvania. I was just there on Monday, and it's the same thing. We have assembly workers, and the younger ones, they're expecting to have a phone or a tablet to do their work. They don't like paper travelers. And it's actually, we can measure the retention difference, if they're they use Augmenteer in part of the business. If they're using Augmenteer, it's more likely that they're going to feel engaged and we'll retain them. So it's pretty sort of visceral for me.
Awesome. All right, so there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of noise and chatter about economic uncertainty in the near future. We've done some research recently that pulls out three key themes about economic uncertainty: agility, flexibility, and consistency in operations. Those are top of mind. So my question to the panel is, how does a digitally mature organization that's made the pivot to a value-focused deployment how are they set up better to survive this uncertainty? So what's your perspective on that, Allison?
Oh, well, I mean, one, they'll have the information and data available to understand what to do next. You know, one of the biggest things about being agile and resilient is to actually understand your surroundings and what you're facing. So I think that that's one of the biggest things, and helping them understand, you know, what to do, when to do it, and how to learn from it, I think is also important. Matt mentioned prognostics earlier. You know, it's not just understanding, hey, what do we think we need to do, but I mean, did it actually work, and what do we do next different?
What about you, Lance? What do you see in Cargill as preparations for this uncertainty?
Well, uncertainty is the only certainty, right? So I learned that this morning. So, no, I think the key, Allison hit it, it's agility. I mean, we've got to be able to look at data very comprehensively. We can't be single dimensional. We don't know what's going to hit us tomorrow. I mean, you know, we had supply chain problems that came out of COVID, or maybe they were starting to hit us before COVID. But, you know, that's one angle. We have the labor issues. We have rising costs and inflation, and then a possible economic downturn, which will play into demand. But, you know, we've got to be able to react, or sorry, let me say it differently, respond quickly when those scenarios occur. And, you know, digital gives us some of the capability to do that, whether it's through, you know, analytics insight, or whether it's through better data visualization, better connection end-to-end across the supply chain. That's going to help us on the journey. And I don't think the world of uncertainty is going to go away. I mean, we used to bank on these runs, bear runs, bull runs, but I think that world's changing now. You know, we see what happened in Ukraine as an example. You see climate change as an example. So we've got to be ready for anything.
Right.
And digital helps us get there, responding more in real time. And I think that's the key.
Great. Thanks. Anthony?
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that. We're in a fortunate position. I think we were less reactive than some of our competition, and it has to do to the first question of the digital DNA. We brought in a new chief supply chain officer. He came from Jabil. He worked on startups, and when he started, he really pushed the organization to move at the speed of industry, not at the speed of Molex. I remember one meeting, we were in a factory, and they were talking about, this factory's been here for 50 years, here's our tenure. He told them this is a bad thing today. Do not tout this anymore. That's old mental models, old ways of thinking. We need to be agile. We need to manufacture wherever we can. And so he's standing up our intelligent digital supply chain. It's made up of several capabilities, but if anybody's interested, I can either introduce you to him or I can walk you through the overview. But it's all about what you described: agile, flexible, consistent. How do we manufacture anywhere, looking at our footprint?
Nice. All right, great. Thanks, everybody. So how do you see the role of augmented reality in preparing for the great retirement to come in the next 7 to 10 years of Gen Xers, of which I'm one, and baby boomers? And when they take their experience with them, how will AI and augmented reality help bridge that gap? Anthony, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think there's a role for it, and we try to look at what is the problem we're trying to solve, what's the capability gap, and how do we close that? Whether it's we need to automate something so that we don't need to rely on the tacit knowledge of an individual, or is it's so complex that we need to think about augmented reality, virtual reality. We've got a struggle within our sites, a lot of churn, especially overseas. And so our gap is around how do we upskill quickly? How do you understand where there's an individual somewhere else in the factory, or maybe in another adjacent factory that we can reshuffle, and how we optimize that team, because we have operations where if one individual is off sick, the whole line goes down. And so that's the capability we're trying to build. AR probably has a space in that. We haven't yet pursued it, but we're trying to understand how we can better leverage our teams.
What about you, Lance?
Well, employee turnover, attrition is a real thing, and you know, so I think more and more we have to shorten the time it takes to bring somebody on board, to train them. And again, I go back to question one about Gen Z and millennials. They don't learn the same way we used to.
Right.
You know, the binders of information, the 40-page documents, they're not worth what they're printed on anymore. I'm sorry to say that, but you know, that's not how they learn. And I think we've all even adjusted, even as baby boomers or Gen X, I guess. We've all learned to do things differently. When we go out and do work on our own for our vehicle or our home, we watch the YouTube video.
Right.
Right? And by the way, we fast forward to only the part we need. Right? Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, we do that because we want to only know what we need to know. And I think, you know, augmented reality, whether it's in training or whether it's part of a learning program, it's just faster ways of learning. It's easier ways of learning. I mean, a lot of that generation has grown up in the virtual world with, you know, gaming systems and computer systems, and they learn differently. And I think we need to respect that and learn from it as well, because it's a better way to learn.
It's hard to be an agile organization and give new employees the time to come up to speed, right? So we need them to have a much shorter learning curve in the new paradigm, right? Allison?
And
I'm
maybe
sorry.
just one more point on
Point,
that, 'cause
yeah, please.
I think it's important. Even when you think about the documentation we have today,
Yeah.
how much time do we spend maintaining something
Right.
that no one consumes?
Right.
So I think there's, and I know every company does it, right?
It's
We
for the
may-
auditors, that's why.
Okay, now I get it.
Yeah. True.
Anyway, pass it on to you, Elsa.
Perfect. Yeah, so I think first that a lot of these technologies, one of the things that they can do in the next years to prepare us is to start trying to capture and get the information that is most important to those tasks before we start losing these employees. So it can help, you know, reduce the noise and really focus on the critical elements, the competencies, what do we see as trends, what do we need to really train them on and make sure they know. Another thing that I think is important, one of the best control system conversions I've ever been a part of is when we had that digital twin come in and I had all the operators, or they weren't my operators, right? We were part of the envelope, go in and watch them, be able to start understanding and playing with it and giving some feedback to make tweaks. But even after that, this world is coming up with, they want to go between virtual and reality. They live in both spaces and they want it.
Right.
This technology provides a safe space to fail. It provides the ability to do technical review boards,
Right.
feedback, and information like that.
Certainly lowers the risk on high-risk activities, right? Russ, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because like when we talk to Colgate, you know, their vision of the future is that they should be able to run with a smaller, more resilient workforce, that people can do many more jobs, and that the gap between what they're being asked to do and what they know how to do can be closed at the moment of need with, you know, appropriate videos, augmented reality. So whatever that person needs to do that job, they know they can do it safely. Now they can, you know, so they can, like you go into some food plants I've been in, you know, it's like, oh, we have 72 people scheduled for the line. We've got 66 today. And the problem is you don't know which 6 are missing, right? You know, Jin does the changeover better than anyone else, but he's not here today, right? And so I think what we're seeing in the customer thing is they want to really connect the knowledge about a person's, you know, certification skills and abilities and experience with the work that they might be assigned to do or are going to be assigned to do, so they can make, you know, sort of, you know, call an audible, you know, you come there, who's on the field, or who's going to play cornerback today, you know? And so if you have the data, the performance data, you're at least in a position to try to do that, where today, you know, we just look into the factory and it's like, you know, they're all the same. I don't know who that person is. They came in last week, you know. I don't know what they can do.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I'll just add, you know, in my travels and understanding of augmented reality and use cases, if you're not applying that to field service operations right now, you're behind. That is a game changer. If you're running to 100 field service technicians that are very, very specialized, and you haven't figured out how augmented reality can enable a central feed system to communicate to them, you're behind the curve. So.
Yeah, for sure. So Russ, you mentioned, you're Russ. Lance, earlier, sorry about that. You mentioned these binders of procedure documents and how that's a waste of time. And oftentimes, the senior people know the best way to do something that's not the official way, right? So how do you see augmented reality or AI or any advanced tools helping to ferret out those best practices and standardize those and codify them into the system?
Yeah, I think one thing is, how do you get information out to an operator? You know, again, I'll say the world of thick documents, big documents, is slowly fading away, and that's becoming metadata, searchable. We can query it. We can tag it, and I think AI can search hundreds of documents, thousands of documents, millions of documents, and be able to help with troubleshooting, problem solving, based on that expert analysis. And I think, taking that out of someone's head, codifying it, and giving them easy guidance, right? So that they haven't got to go search through all the data and search through all the information, but it's kind of giving them options or presenting them scenarios that they can choose from, making a new employee or somebody without the tribal knowledge, making it easier for them to do the job.
Right, that's a good way to put it, tribal knowledge. That's how do we pull that out of their heads as they're on their way out the door and retain that in the organization. So Anthony, yep.
I'm sorry, Anthony. So one of the things we're doing at Augmenteer, we built our platform foundation on an AI foundation with sort of 5 visions. One is we could identify work process opportunities. 2, we could identify workforce development opportunities. 3, we could identify workforce engagement opportunities. But the other thing that we've have built the infrastructure to really is to capture and convert tribal knowledge in the flow of work, because I'm an old guy, and I remember at DuPont in 1986 they were going to put a knowledge management system in, and they were going to get their experts in, and we're going to take it out of the expert's head and put it in this thing, and it never happened. And so the only way, in my opinion, to capture tribal knowledge is you have to capture it while it's happening. Because if you say to me, well, tell me everything you know, I'll give you 10 things. But then if you say, well, how do you fix that? Well, yeah, I know how to do that too, right? So you can't pry it out of people's heads. You have to kind of capture it, in the fabric of when they're actually doing the work, right?
Right,
So,
as it's happening.
as it's happening.
Yep. Anthony?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on that, because it's, for our culture, we have a guiding principle around the challenge process, and we should always be searching for a better way, challenging, seeking challenge, and applying that challenge process. And so we have that ingrained in our culture. I think the challenge we have, not to use the same word, but the issue that we have is, how do we get to that prognostic, closed loop, get that information embedded in some type of AI or machine learning, and having the operator take time to either document or some type of automated solution to get that mental fix that happened, that tribal knowledge onto paper, so that we can start learning from it. That's been our struggle, and I think as we improve our tools, as we introduce new things that they feel more trusted to listen to and to be advised on, they'll get better at that, but it is a challenge for us. So.
Nice. And finally, Allison, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I can also see, I think about the unplanned events, right, that always happen. And when I think about AI, I think it's a great opportunity to look and see, how is my factory performing? How is my plant trending? And to capture, 1, you see trends happening, and 2, who's behind the board and how is it responding? It's not always the task and the speed. I think it can also be looking at making sure the task as well as the amount of throughput and the outcome, right? Quality. Are we producing exactly what we want on time? Because rework costs money. So AI can really be helpful in understanding too how to respond and react. If you do have a device or a system out there with you and it notices, okay, well, it's taking you 20 or 30 minutes, say for a maintenance technician to start troubleshooting the gearbox, right? Okay, would you like to look at this video on troubleshooting a gearbox, or provide, hey, this exactly happened 2 weeks ago and this is what they did then.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the application of AI, again, back to my earlier comment of what problem are we trying to solve, can be applied in the zoom in point of view, like we're talking about for a machine or for some tribal knowledge, domain knowledge. But I think just as impactful is that zoom out view of looking at big data, looking across our enterprise. If you run this press, this brand, you're 10% less efficient. If you did it over here on this press, we can't connect those dots with our human mind. So I think trying to figure out how to apply AI zoomed out and zoomed in is a good approach. And that might build some confidence when you go to the zoom in, look at what it can do over here.
Sure. No, that's a great point.
Yeah, and kind of tying back to something I said before, if you can rule out 90% of, the perspective and narrow it down and give guidance, that makes it much easier for the operator, the technician.
Right.
The right information to the right people at the right time to make
Yep.
the right decision.
Good.
Right, so narrowing them down is an important part of that.
Really interesting. Years ago, I remember going to a conference, and the head of Bing, the Bing search engine, which I don't think exists any longer, but it was so interesting to listen to him. He says, what we do is we're seeking intention. So that's what we're trying to capture. When I mistype something, they're figuring out what I actually want to get back.
Right.
And they use fit for purpose AI to make sure that your search results are better, and you can see that in the factory. The same thing, there's 1,000 results, but a year from now, maybe there should only be 3 results, because a person in your position with this data, these are the 3 things they looked at, right? Getting rid of things as choices to narrow down the...
By the way, can we get that guy to look at our cell phone keyboard? Because it never fixes my words right.
Well, I think too, in all of these things, go to support the workforce. And if a workforce feels supported, they feel more successful.
Right.
They're more likely to stay there, and then also identify and help you make your own processes more improved. Again, if we can get that information from them, if they feel supported, they're going to in turn, I believe, it's
Stick
human
around.
nature, I think, that
Yeah.
still exists.
Right. I think so. All right, this has been great discussion. At this point, we'd like to hear some questions from the audience. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. There's a couple of people roaming around with microphones, and we'll do our best to field your questions. So anyone?
My name is Gus Collins. I'm with JTech Corporation. My question is regarding the connected worker. What is y'all's experience with how you provide the connectivity tool for the worker? Are companies providing cell phones and tablets or Apple Watches, or how do you make them connected?
Who wants to take that one?
Who wants to take that one?
I'll take it quickly from the vendor side. So in general, we see most frontline workers are working with tablets, and whether they have a dedicated device, if they're in preventive maintenance, they generally do. But if they're operators, there tend to be devices that are magnetized, and they put against the machine, and they grab them when they need them. So it's generally tablets. Supervisors tend to be more phone-oriented. And a very small subset with sort of industrial smart glasses.
Yeah. I think some wearables are good, right? The ability to have the tablets, but another thing we often forget about, right, are the big jumbo screens and information such as that, right? To be able to put metrics and where are we at, and just information to keep the audience engaged there at work. But there's so many numerous platforms to make sure they're getting the data they need when they need it.
Yeah, and I think with the exception of cybersecurity and architecture, right, you want some flexibility there because, again, different generations may want different tools. My eyesight isn't as good as it used to be, so sometimes the phone doesn't work well for me. But, for younger people, newer on the shop floor, maybe that is an appropriate fit. So I think you want some flexibility there, looking at, the skills your workforce has, the connectivity you have on the shop floor, the practicability, how practical it is to carry something around while you walk, which can be a safety issue, right? That's where sometimes things like monitors and screens may be better. So I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. I think you got to look at the application and related risk and preferences and try to make good decisions for your shop floor.
Yeah, and what we do at Molex, we take a persona-based approach. So what is the persona we're trying to enable this connected worker solution, this capability with? And so we've got various personas that we've identified across our enterprise. These are scalable personas. So for instance, a molding operator has to run 10 different presses, in some cases 20 presses at one time. They need a wearable. They need something, and it's got to give them a signal in a loud, noisy environment. And so we had to tailor that hardware decision based on that persona. And so look at your sites. What are the different personas that are scalable that would justify that type of investment, and then take that approach. That would be my recommendation.
And be cautious of overly connecting your worker, right? There's a lot of PPE that's already required out there for safety. So you start loading them down with, hard hat, gloves, steel toes, and I've also got my iPad with my holster that doesn't get caught up in the, the steps in the ladder cage. And then of course, then there's really sunny days. That iPad doesn't really work too well out there on like the 3rd or 4th deck on a really sunny day.
Great. That was a great question. Thank you. Yes, over here.
Is anyone on the panel using the VR capture for their digital twin modeling? If nothing else, the data, because these manual operations, you're capturing these manual operations from these people. Are you using it to feed your digital twin models at all?
I mean, at Molex, we do a lot of simulation of tooling design, and that's capturing sensor information from the tools from the shop floor. From a factory optimization, we try to keep that simulation capability pretty basic, focused on material flow, focused on how to set up a line versus, you see some companies, they'll do a 3D point cloud and they'll start modeling the machines, and we feel like there's not enough marginal value to do that.
I do believe you may see more as we start getting into more sustainability and ESG, right, opportunities. Some of our capital projects, and we're looking at redesign and or building from the ground up, doing a lot of modeling to see, am I really going to reduce my emissions? Am I really going to use less energy? So I think we'll start seeing more of that.
Augmenteer, do you want to comment?
I was kind of laughing at so as background, my two founders were with me at ThingWorks, and we got purchased by PTC, and their team wrote what is now called Vuforia Studio, the basic, so probably the best industrial AR platform, I would say, in the market. And I used to joke with Jim Heppelman, the CEO, so he goes, we're on stage, I've got this iPad, I'm going to point it at the generator, the doors open up, and I go, Jim, you've made a step change in worker efficiency. He goes, yeah, I have. I go, yeah. Now 2 people are required to do this job, because one's got to hold the pad and the other one's got to open the door. If you put the pad down, you lose the AR thing. So I think if you get outside of training and simulation, I think that the use cases for AR are a lot narrower than we originally thought when I was at PTC. And I would say it's synonymous with the expectation of smart glasses in the enterprise. In 2018, one of the research companies, not LNS, thank God, said there were going to be 5 million smart glasses in the manufacturing enterprise, and I think there were 200,000 sold that year. So I think they go hand in hand. There are these places where hands-free, through field of vision really makes sense. But for end user manufacturers, you don't own the CAD models of your equipment, so you have to go through a scanning process. You have 100 pieces of equipment, 100 different types. And so even if the vendor offers it to you, now your PM people have to, learn Vuforia and Ubimax and Scope AR. So it just seems to be sort of, it's much more niche than I would have predicted when I was on the bandwagon a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're in their chasm too. And for me, this is just my point of view. Once Apple launches their wearable devices, glasses, I think you're going to start seeing a shift, and the expectations of the digital native people will be that eventually in the future.
Great question. Any more questions?
I'm sorry if I'm a Luddite. I apologize.
Okay, well, if there's no more questions, then I'll thank the panel for coming up here and participating. And special thanks to Russ and Augmenteer for sponsoring this panel. Appreciate it.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, too.
Everyone, we are concluding day 2 of the event. Tomorrow we start at 7:30 a.m. here for floor number 4 for the breakfast. We'll start the keynotes at 8:30. Again, I would really appreciate if you can open up your app, 30 seconds, if you can give us some feedback on the panel and the roundtables. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Remember to join us again tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. for another round of inspirational keynote speakers.